We begin today the Gemara on Daf Dalet Amud Aleph, where it says V'hai v'yotza chinam. The Gemara brought before the pasuk v'yotza chinam en kasef that speaks of a ama ivriya. She's a maid, and the pasuk is saying that when she comes to a certain age, then she goes out free from her master without paying, without anything. V'yotza chinam en kasef. Now this is obviously a redundancy. Once it says she goes free, it doesn't have to say en kasef. So from here the Gemara learned that en kesef laden zeh, avol yesh kesef laden acher. That when she leaves her master as a maid, then she doesn't have to pay. But when a husband marries a girl that belongs to her father, which is like her master, that husband will have to pay money to the father, which is the kesef Kidushin, which actually goes and belongs to the father. That's the limud from en kasef. So here the Gemara is going to ask that seemingly, even though there is a redundancy in this pasuk, but we learn from this something else, and it's not extra to learn the din of kesef Kiddushin from here. Fragt the Gemara, v'hai v'yatzachinam lahachi yudasa. Can you say that the pasuk here, when it says v'yatzachinam, and then it adds ein kasef, is coming to teach me here this halacha regarding kesef Kiddushin? What hami ba'ila l'kedetanya? Don't we need the redundancy in this pasuk for what's taught in the Braisa? The Tanya, the Braisa says, V'yatzachinam, if the Torah would write just V'yatzachinam, and the Torah doesn't indicate at what age of maturity this is. It just says at a certain point, she goes out free. When is this? If it would only say that, I would say Eliyamei Bagris. This is at the age of a Begeres, which is 12 and a half. Ein Kasef, then the Torah adds Ein Kasef, Eliyamei Naris. Then I say that this means even at an earlier stage, as soon as she shows the signs of godless, the Shtei which is usually at 12 years old, that's when she goes free. So the Torah is writing the double lashon to say that at the first stage of maturity, at the bas mitzvah age, that's when she goes free. So how can we learn from here, from the extra pasuk, this din of kesef kiddushin that the Gemara said before? Amar Ravina, so Ravina answers, in Cain, le mikra ein kesef, if we would only be learning these two things here regarding the age of when this girl goes free, it should say ein kesef without the yud in the ein. My ein kesef. Why does it say ein kesef with a yud? Ein. So from here, not only do I darshan the extra words of ein kesef, but we'll also darshan that extra yud. Ein kesef laden zeh, avol yesh kesef laden acher. So now we have a place for a third drasha to learn from here that when she leaves her master, there's no money she has to pay. But when a husband marries this girl that's belonged to her father, he does have to pay for it. That's the father. So this is a very unusual drasha, that you darshan a yud in the word ein. So the Gemara asks on this, where do you see such a thing? Where do I see that I darshan a yud in the word ein? It seems like that's just the spelling of the word. So the Gemara brings that there's another place, another Braisa, that darshans a yud as well in this way. Tanya, we learned the Braisa, v'zera ein lo. Pasuk says that she had no children. Now what this pasuk is speaking about is a bas Yisrael that married, a bas kohen that is. Now a bas kohen has rights to eat truma from her father's house. But if a bas kohen marries a Yisrael, for the time period that she's married to her husband, which is a Yisrael, she cannot eat truma. Not only that, if her husband passes away and she still has children, whether einiklach descendants that are from that marriage to the Yisrael, she can't eat truma. If her husband passed away and there was no children or any descendants left, so then she goes back to her father's house and she could eat truma. And the pasuk describes it, v'zera ein lo. If her husband, the Yisrael, passed away and there was no descendants that are alive, so then she goes back to her father to eat truma. So here it says also the term ein lo. She has no descendants. And ein li'ela zara. So the Braisa says, I would think that that's only referring to actually the children itself. That if she has no children, she can go back to her father. Zera zara minayin. How do I know grandchildren? Let's say she had children, but those children passed away already. And now she only has grandchildren. Will those grandchildren that are alive from this marriage to this Yisrael hold her back from eating truma? So yeah, we learn out from here, Talmud Lema zera ein lo, because it says the word ein, and ein with a yud in the word, so we can read it differently, ayin lo. As if it's written, instead of reading it ein, read it ayin, because there's the yud there, and therefore we understand it to mean ayin lo, you have to inspect the matter deeper. You look deeper to see if there's any descendants, not only children, but even grandchildren. So here we see that we're darshaning the yud to become an ayin law. Another thing the Braisa says, ve'en li'el zera kosher. I would think maybe only if she has children or descendants, that is, einiklach, that are kosher, then she can't eat truma. Zera posel minayin. What if she has descendants, and this is referring really to grandchildren, not to children, and that children, grandchildren that are posel. How do I know that holds her back from eating truma as well? Maybe you would say that zera posel is not a real zera. It's not proper children with a proper yichus to her, so maybe they don't hold her back from eating the truma. Talmud Loima, Zera Einla, we learn from the same pasuk, Zera Einla, Ayinla, look deeper into this matter. Any type of children or descendants from this marriage holds her back from going back to her father's house to eat truma.
This is the same word to make this.
Correct. So the Gemara is going to clarify that right now. So the only reason the Gemara is bringing this up is as a source for the fact that we darshan the yud in the ein. But the Gemara does clarify here that it seems like we're learning two different points from the same word, Zera Einla. Didn't you just say that the extra yud is teaching me that even grandchildren hold her back from eating truma? How could you learn out from the extra yud to say that zera posel holds her back from eating truma? So the Gemara says, zera zara lo yitzrich. The truth is, for grandchildren, for that I don't need a pasuk to say that it's in the category of zera that it holds her back from eating truma. Why? The bnei banim arein kabanim. Grandchildren are the same as children. It's the same thing, and therefore you don't have to have a special pasuk for that. Ki yitzrich lezera pasel. The main chiddush over here is even zera pasel, a mamzer, let's say. Again, like I mentioned, it's not talking about actual children that's a mamzer, because the moment she gets married to someone that's pasel, and that's what make the children mamzedim, she can never go back and eat truma again. She becomes pasel because of that marriage. So we're talking here about grandchildren that are mamzer, a grandchild that's a mamzer, and on that you need a special yud in the ain to say ayin law, that even those that grandchild will hold her back from going back to the father's house, the kayin, to eat truma. Okay, this is the source for the fact that I darshan a yud in this word ain. Now the Gemara asks on this itself, where did the Tana find a source in psukim of the Torah that the yud in the word ain could be considered extra, and you darshan from this? So Amri, it was explained because Ksiv, there's a pasuk where it says Me'ain Bilam, and Bilam refused to come, or Me'ain Yavami, the Yavama refuses to be Meyabim. So here, these two words of Me'ain and Me'ain, but that it says by the Yavama, the like Ksiv B'hu Yud. Over here you see that it's spelled without a Yud inside. So V'hacha Ksiv B'Yud, and over here by the word Zera Ein Lo, or by Ein Kosef, it does say the Ein with a Yud. So Shema Minala Drashu Dasa. So from this I see that the Yud in the word Ein could be used as a Drasha, because I see the Torah spells the word Ein without a Yud. Okay, there's a discussion about this in the Mefarshim because it's not exactly the same word. The Gemara is proving this from the word Me'ain. So you could say Me'ain could be spelled without a Yud, but maybe Ein does have to be spelled with a Yud. The Pnei Yeshua over here says that B'derech Klal, in the entire Torah, we don't usually darshan the Yud of the word Ein. You have many times in the Torah where it says the word Ein and it's always spelled with a Yud, and the Gemara doesn't darshan it all the time. Over here, when the word Ein Kasef, when the word Ein is an extra word, so then we darshan every aspect of the extra word, including the Yud of the extra word. When the whole word is extra, then I say that even the Yud, it theoretically could have been spelled without a Yud, so then I darshan. But otherwise, B'derech Klal in the Torah, just because there's a Yud there, you don't darshan it.
Not always you need. If you need to darshan,
Again?
not always you need to darshan.
Again, what?
Not always you need to darshan. If you need to darshan, maybe that's why you darshan.
If the whole word is not extra, then the Yud is part of the spelling. It's not considered to be extra. If the whole word is extra, so then I dissect the word and darshan even the Yud, that because it could be written without the Yud. Okay, now the Gemara comes back to a point that was mentioned before in Daf Gimel. Before the Gemara brought that we have a source to say that Maisi Yedeh, that all the income of a girl that's in the age of Ketana or Naira goes to the father. And then we have the source from Ein Kasef to say that the Kesef Kidushin that a husband gives to marry this girl also goes to the father. So the Gemara now will explain, why do I need a separate source for both of them? Once I know that the income goes to the father, shouldn't that mean that the Kesef Kidushin that a husband gives should also go to the father? Isn't it like a sort of an income? It's a husband that's paying this money because of her, so it should go to the father. The Gemara explains. The pasuk here had to tell me that the kesef kedushin that a husband gives for this girl goes to the father, and it also has to say separately that her income goes to the father. Because if it would say that the kedushin goes to the father, then I would say because the kesef kedushin the husband's giving her, she didn't work for this. and therefore that goes to the father. She's owned by the father. The father is the one that's being Mekadisher. So when she gets the money, even if she's a Naira and she could have been Mekadesh herself, but it goes to the father. She didn't work for this. But when it comes to her income, and she's working, she's earning this money herself, so I would say over here, because it's her work, that she gets to keep this. So therefore I need a special pasuk to say, as the Gemara brought before, from Chiyimker Ishis Bitoy Le'ama, to say that goes to the father as well. On the other hand, if the Torah would tell me that the income of what she earned with her own work goes to the father, I would say that maybe the reason is the ka mizanamine, because the father is the one that's feeding her, and the father is feeding her with the intention of, in return, getting the money that she earns. This is the money that she earns on a regular basis. So the father is sort of keeping in mind that I'm going to take care of my daughter. She lives by me. I pay her for everything. I give her for everything that she needs. But whatever income she makes comes to me. That's the exchange that the father is having in mind. Aval Kidushin. But when it comes to money of Kidushin that a husband gives, that it's coming from her, it's something that's unusual. It's not the regular income that she makes. And it comes from the husband that gives her this money. That kind of money the father's not having in mind to take for himself. So that I would say maybe she could keep. So tzriche, therefore we have the limud of ein kasef to say that kesef Kiddushin that a husband gives goes to the father as well. Okay, here the Gemara is going to go back. This is sort of a side point, but the Gemara will explain more in detail the braise that we quoted before regarding the drasha of the Yatzachina Men Kasev, which is regarding a naira that goes free from her master. So the Gemara before brought a braise that explained the two parts of the pasuk. So the braise before said, if the Torah would only say that she goes free, I would say Elu Yemei Bagris. That when does that refer to? What age of maturity? A Bagris, 12 and a half. Then it says Ein Kasev. So this lashon is adding to say Elu Yemei Naris, that she goes free as soon as she becomes at the first level of maturity, when the simanim that she's a gedayla at 12 years old. Frag the Gemara, why does the Torah have to write both of these points here? Let the Torah write that she goes free when she's a naira, and then there would be no reason for the Torah to say that she goes free when she's 12 and a half. She's already going free when she's a naira. Why is the Torah writing this redundancy, teaching me that she goes free as a naira and as a begeres? So Rabba answers, Ba ze v'limid al ze. When the Torah writes both that she goes free as a naira, or first actually as a begeres, and then as a naira, one is coming and teaching us about the other. Right? What the Gemara means to say is that since the Torah did not write clearly what the age she goes free, so if it would only write once, that at an age of maturity she goes free, then I wouldn't jump to say that that's the first stage of maturity. I would say it's the final stage of maturity, which is begeres. So the Torah has to write it twice, a double lashon, to tell you that it's not only the final stage of maturity, but once it writes it twice, it's limed, it teaches me and shows that it must be referring to the first stage of maturity as well. So that's why it has to write the double lashon here. And the Gemara brings an example for this. Midi the hava toishav v'sacher. This is a similar halacha to a toishav and a sacher. Now this toishav and sacher is referring to an eved ivri, a Yiddish slave that's owned by a kohen. What's the halacha of the eved ivri that's owned by a kohen? He cannot eat any truma from the kohen. This is an interesting thing because an eved kanani, a Goyish slave that's owned by a kohen, could eat truma. And the reason for the difference is because he is owned by his master completely. There's a complete ownership. The master owns his whole body like a mamish, a complete kinyan. So therefore he can eat truma. An eved ivri though is a Yisrael. He's serving his master. He's owned by his master to some extent, but he doesn't own his guf. So therefore, being a Yisrael, he can't eat truma. And when the pasuk says this, it says that whether this eved ivri is a toishav, whether the eved ivri is a sacher, he can't eat the truma of the kohen. Now, what is the redundancy of this lashon? Toishav, a resident by the kohen, or a sacher, or hired by the kohen? So let's see. The Tanya, so the Braisa says, when the pasuk says, the actual lashon of the pasuk is Toishav Kayin, Visacher lo yechal kodesh. Whether he's a Toishav by the Kayin, whether he's a Sacher, he should not eat the Truma. So the Braisa says, Toishav, what is a Toishav when it refers to an Eved Ivri speak about? Zekanik Kinyan Olam. This is a person that's acquired to him forever, which doesn't mean mamish forever, but it means a Eved Ivri that they drilled a hole in his ear. It's called an Eved Nirtza, and he stays there until Yovel, 50 years, or whenever Yovel comes. So even an Eved that's there for such a long period of time, he still can't eat truma. Sacher Zekoni Ken Yishanim. And now the Sacher is the one that's hired. Hired means he's only there for the number of years that an Eved Ivri usually works for his master, and that's 6 years. So both of them cannot eat Truma. So now the question is, Yom HaTaishav, the pasuk should only say that the one that's there up to Yovel cannot eat Truma, v'lo Yom HaSacher. It's not necessary to say that if he's there only for 6 years, that he doesn't eat Truma. Vani Yomer, I would say, Konik Kinyan Olam and Ayachol. If he's there for so long until Yovel, he can't eat Truma. Konik Kinyan Yishanim leKol Shekain. So if he's there only for 6 years, for sure, he's just hired for a shorter period of time. For sure, he can't eat Truma. Why does Torah have to tell me both of these halachas, Taishav and Sacher? So the Brisa answers, no. Ilu came, if the Torah would only say the term Taishav, then I would say, what does Taishav mean? I would say maybe Taishav means that Konik Ken Yishanim. The word Taishav is not clear enough. Taishav just means a resident. So maybe that means that he's there for 6 years. And because he's there only for 6 years, therefore he can't eat the Truma of the Kaim. Al Konik Ken Yishanim, if he's there until Yovel, maybe he could eat the Truma. So therefore, Bas Sacher, the Torah writes both terminologies. It writes the term Taishav and it writes Sacher. Bas Sacher, when the Torah writes the term Sacher, which means that he's only hired for a certain period of time, the limit al Taishav, and that clarifies what the term Taishav means. Sha'afa Pisha Kani Kinyan Eilah. That Taishav, which means a resident, means that even though he's there for so long, Ein Eichel, he still can't eat Truma. So just like over there, the Torah is writing both Taishav and Sacher, and it has to write both terms in order to be Megala, that the term Taishav means for such a long period of time he doesn't eat. Similar over here regarding the two expressions of a Yatzechinam and Kasef. By writing both terminologies, so it shows me that not only by the age of Bagras does she leave, but even before, from the age of Nairas. But the Gemara doesn't accept this answer because it's not exactly the same. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye asks on this, Midami. You can't compare the case over there regarding the two expressions in the Torah, Taishav and Sacher, to here when it says the two expressions that we learn, you may Bagras and you may Naras. Because Hassam Terei Gufinino. There's a reason for the Torah to write both things. Because it's two different people. There's one person that's hired and working for 6 years, and one person that could be working forever until Yovel. So even if the Torah would spell out clearly that a Taishav, that's a Nirtzav, the Torah would say clearly that the meaning of Taishav means a person that has his ear drilled, and therefore he's going to be by the Kayin until Yovel. That he still can't eat Truma. And then it would say another pasuk, and it would say that it's speaking only about someone that's hired for 6 years. So then I would say, so the Torah is repeating something which it wasn't necessary. I could have learned it with a kal v'chaimer, right? If someone that's there forever can't eat truma, for sure someone that's there just for 6 years can't eat. Now the rule is sometimes we find something that you could learn out with a kal v'chaimer, the Torah will write it. So the point is over here in this pasuk of Taishav and Sacher, we're talking about two different avodim. And therefore, the Torah, if it would tell me both halachas, it's not speaking about the very same person. But over here regarding the halacha of this Amma Ivriya that leaves her master, we're talking about one Amma Ivriya, Chad Gufahi. It's the same person. So Kinafkala Benaidos, if she leaves her master when she comes to the first age of maturity, Anaida Bebagres my boygabe. What is she doing by her master as a begeres? So essentially what Abai is really asking is, if we're talking about the very same Amma Ivriya, why would the Torah write two psukim to tell me the halacha of Naidus and the halacha of Begeres? It's the same person. Here, the Torah should have written one pasuk and it should have spelled out befedish that the age is Naida, and it's not necessary to say anything else. When the Torah tells me halacha, which is actually two different individuals, the fact that the Torah is saying both is not such a question, because the fact is it could apply to two people, and therefore the Torah writes two things, even though I could have understood it on my own. But if we're talking about one person, why would the Torah write it in such a way where in the end it's teaching me nothing? Because it's the same person that already left as a Naida. So the Torah should have written Befedish Naida, and that's it. So therefore Abaye says a different shot. When it says here, the redundancy in the pasuk, v'yatzachinam eliyemei bagris, and en kesef eliyemei naidus, it's talking elam Abaye le'nitzcha ela lebagir the islandess. But what it's talking about over here is a woman that doesn't show the signs of maturity as a naida. She's an islandess. An islandess is a woman that doesn't show those signs, not the situs and not other signs. and she can't have any children, and she goes straight from being a katana to becoming a begeres, which happens at the age of 20. At the age of 20, you see that she's an island. There's a different simonim to know that she's an island. She goes straight to the second stage of maturity of being a begeres, not that stage in between of being a naira. So because I would have thought to say benaitis tepuk, that if she becomes a naira, she's a regular healthy girl that becomes a naira, then she leaves her master. But the bagras loy tepuk. But if she becomes a begeres without that stage of naira loy tepuk, she doesn't leave her master. Kamash Malon. So therefore, the pasuk has to say v'yatza chinam on bagras for this islandess and ein kasef for the naira. Two different things. Okay, there's a discussion over here in this Rishayim benigay to this begeres, because as I mentioned, she only becomes a begeres at age 20. So if she becomes a begeres at age 20, how is she still by her master at age 20? Because she's only there for 6 years. Doesn't that mean that she was sold at age 16? And therefore, or 16, 17, and therefore at age 20 she's still by her master? But how is that possible? How was she sold at such a late age? Usually, you could only sell to become a Ivriya at age when you're katana. Okay, there's a discussion in Rishayim about that, exactly how this works. But that's how the Gemara teaches over here, that you need it for the begeres, which never becomes a naira. Maskif lo Mar Bar Avashi, but Mar Bar Avashi doesn't accept this answer either. V'lav kal v'chaymeru, isn't this a kal v'chaymer? If when it comes to a girl that becomes a naira, she has the signs of the first stage of maturity. She'ein maitzim b'rishusav, a girl at that age does not leave her father's possession. But if she's owned by a master, she does leave her master. Bagros, a girl that comes to the second stage of maturity of begeres, and here she even leaves her father's possession. She's totally independent. For sure, I would understand that she would have to leave her master as well, even if she never became a naira because she was an islandess. So this is a kal v'chaymer. I don't need the pasuk to teach this to me. So Mar Bar Avashi says the pshat here is different. Le'nitzracha ela le'ikir zvina dailinus. The pasuk here, when it says v'yatza chinam en kasav and v'yatza chinam refers to the bagres, it's coming to teach me the chiddush that she could even be sold as an am ivriya. Why would I think not? I would think to say the asya simanin naidas have a zvina. If this is a girl that has simanim of naidas, so then the sale is a sale. But the loyasi simani naidas. But if she can't show simanim of a naida, she's not a regular healthy girl. Then the sale is not a sale in the first place. In other words, the svara would be the taita only allows to sell a girl that we know will have those simanim, which will then release her from her master. But if she's not going to show those simanim that are going to release her from her master, she's going to end up being by her master for a longer period of time. So maybe the taita doesn't want you to sell her in the first place, so she shouldn't have to be so long by her master. Now the question that Taisus over here asks, and this is the obvious question of the Gemara, how would we know when she's a katana if she's ever going to be a islandess or not? When she's, let's say, 8 years old, you don't know if she's healthy and she's going to show signs of a naira, or she's not healthy and she's going to show signs of being an islandess, which will only come out to be at age 20. So the basic point of it you have to say is that later on you're going to see retroactively limafreya that the sale was never a sale and the master will have to give back all the money, but you'll only find this out later. But that was the havamin over here, that maybe we should say that by an islandess there's no sale in the first place. Kamash Malan v'yatza chinam chulu. So therefore, Mar Bar Avashi says the extra pasuk v'yatza chinam is not coming to teach that she leaves as a begeres. For that we have a kal v'chaymer, but it's actually coming to teach that she could even be sold. Now, the Gemara asks on this last point there, Mar Bar Avashi, what was the problem Mar Bar Avashi had? The Omar, he asked the question on Abayis Pshad, v'lav kal v'chaymeru. I don't need a pasuk to teach that she leaves as a begeres because it's a kal v'chaymer. But ha'amirina, didn't we say before milsa da asya b'kal v'chaymer? Tarach v'kasav lakra. Even when there's something that's understood misvara from a kal v'chaymer, but the Torah will spell it out sometimes anyways. So what was Mar Bar Avashi's problem? Says the Gemara, Hana mili heichad eleka l'shnuye. We only resort to that and say that the Torah writes something that could be learned from a kal v'chaymer if we don't have a better answer. But in a case where we could answer and show that there's a separate chiddush that cannot be of a kal v'chaymer, so then there's an answer for it. So therefore Mar Bar Avashi gives this answer. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara now brings here another source for the kinyan of Kidushin Kesef. So we're going back to the subject that we were discussing. What's the source? Kesef Minolan. That's how this whole Gemara began. Where is the source for Kidushin Kesef? So before we brought the source from V'yatza China Mein Kasef, now the Gemara here brings the source that was already mentioned in the beginning of the Masechta. The Tana Maisi Lo Mahacha. But a Tana and a Braisa brings the source from the following Braisa. Tanya, the Braisa says, Ki yikach ish isha bala. V'hayom le'simtzachem be'enav ki matzah b'gaymer. So the term used here for marriage is ki yikach. Now how do you take? Take a wife how? And kicha ele bekesef. So kicha means through kesef. The husband gives kesef. V'cheinu oimer. I compare this and I learn it out from Nasati Kesef Asade Kach Mimeni. There it uses the term Kach as well. And how did Avram acquire the field where Amaras HaMachpelah was? With money. So from there we learn out that the kinyan of a Isha is with Kesef. In the beginning of the Gemara used the term Kicha Kicha, which sounds like Gzeira Shava. Here in the Braisa it doesn't use the term Kicha Kicha, it sounds like V'chein Hu Aimer, which is comparing. Some Rishonim say it's not really a Gzeira Shava. Okay, but now the Braisa asks, why do I need a source from this pasuk, from this limud, to say that it's kesef? V'halei dinu. I can tell you the source for Kidushin Kesef by a Isha is a kavachaymer. What would be the kavachaymer? Oma ivriya. How does a master acquire a maid, an oma ivriya? He acquires it by paying with kesef. She'ein a niknes b'biyeh. So there, when a master is acquiring a maid, so the kinyan of biyeh does not apply, does not take effect. Nevertheless, niknis bekesef. But the kinyan of kesef, a master to acquire her maid, his maid that is, works with kesef. So zu, if so, when it comes to a isha, I see that she has more of a benefit in her being acquired to her husband. She niknis bebiyah. Over here, the kinyan of biyah does work. Ein edin shetikna bekesef. So for sure, I should say that the kinyan of kesef would work for an isha. So therefore, I have a kavachayim from Am Ivriya. I don't need a pasuk of kiyikach and compared to Nasati Kesef Asada Kach Mimeni. Says the Gemara, no, you can't learn out from Am Ivriya. Why? Yevama Tichiach, because I'll prove to you from Yevama to refute this kavachayim. What do I see by Yevama? Sheniknes bebiyah ve'eina niknes bekesef. When it comes to a Yevama, the Torah specifically says that you could only be kaina a Yevama with biyah, but not with kesef. So the fact that by Isha there's a kinyan of biyah can't be used as a kavachaymer that there's also a kinyan of kesef, because I can learn from Yevama that it's dafke biyah and not kesef. Says the Gemara, but you can't compare a Isha to a Yevama. Mal Yevama shekenei niknes b'shtar. A Yevama is different. There I see the Torah limits the marriage of Yevama only biyah, not kesef and not even shtar either. But when it comes to an Isha, there's a kinyan, there's a Kidushin of shtar, so you can't compare Isha to a Yevama. So if so, we go back to the kavachaymer. We should learn the kinyan of kesef by an Isha from Am Ivriya. Now the Braisa concludes and says these words, Talmud Loimar ki yikach ish. And therefore we need a pasuk of ki yikach ish, and the way we learned the term kicha from Maras HaMachpelah, kach mimeni, to tell me that you could be kaina her with kesef. So the Gemara immediately asks, why does the Braisa conclude Talmud Loimar ki yikach ish? Ha lama likra. Why do I have to learn Kidushin Kesef from the pasuk? Ha'asyala. Didn't the Braisa just conclude that I could learn it from Am Ivriya? And the refutation from Yevama is not good. You can't compare an Isha to Yevama. You compare an Isha to Am Ivriya. Amar Ravashi, so Ravashi says, no, you actually cannot compare an Isha to a master that's acquiring a maid, Am Ivriya. Why? The whole comparison, the whole kavachaymer from a Isha to Am Ivriya, right from the beginning, it does not make sense. Where did you want to learn out the kinyan of kesef by an Isha? From the maid. There it's different. Over there I see she's acquired with money, and then if she wants to redeem herself before the time, so then she has to pay back the remainder of the money to the master for the years that she didn't work. So over there I see it goes both ways. She goes in, she comes out with kesef. But over here when it comes to a Isha, when she leaves her master, the Kidushin is not with kesef, it's with a get. She leaves in a whole different way. So I see that I can't compare a Isha to Am Ivriya. In essence, what the Gemara is really saying is, you can't compare the kinyan of an Am Ivriya to the kinyan of an Isha. The kinyan of an Am Ivriya is some sort of an actual kinyan for her to work. By an Isha, it's a marriage. It's also a kinyan, but it's a kinyan for a marriage. It's a different type of kinyan, so you can't compare the two. And therefore you need a source for kinyan kesef from ki yikach ish that we learn out from the lashon of kach mimeni that it says by Avram, by Maras HaMachpelah.
Chinam?
Again, but that's if she comes to the age of Naira. The Gemara here is referring to before the age of Naira. If Gira in Kesef, if she wants to leave before the time, she has to pay the money for the year she didn't work yet to the master. Okay, so it comes out now that after the whole Gemara, we have two sources for Kidushin Kesef. From V'yatza Chinam en Kesef Laden Zeh av Yesh Kesef Laden Acher, and that's the money that goes to the father when he marries off his daughter. And we have the source over here from Kiyikach, that the term Kiche means money as well. So the Gemara explains why I need both sources. We need the source from the pasuk V'yatza Chinam, and it refers to the en Kesef, and Kiyikach. And I also need the source from Kiyikach that we just said, that we learn out from the term Kiche. Yikachish, that is. If I would only have the source of Kiyikach, Hava Mine Kidushin the Yov Lo Baal Didav. So then I would say the Kesef Kidushin that a woman gets from the husband always belongs to her, regardless if she's a Begeres, a Naira, Katana, even if she's owned by the father and the father's marrying her off, it doesn't matter, she keeps the money. So over there, what do you see by the pasuk V'yatza Chinam en Kesef Lo Odein Zev Yesh Kesef Lo Odein Acher, that it goes to the master, it means it goes to the father. On the other hand, if the Torah would only write that pasuk of V'yatza Chinam, so I see there the inyan of Kesef Kidushin, and I see there that it goes to the father, so can't I learn from there both points already? Hava Mina, I would think to say, Heiche the Yava Ihi Lididei V'kidashtoi, that if it would be in the reverse, what would happen if she would give him money for the Kiddushin? Instead of the husband giving the Isha the Kesef Kiddushin, what happens if she would give him the Kesef Kiddushin? Have a Kiddushin? Maybe I would say that that's a Kiddushin as well. Now, how would that fit into the pasuk of V'yatza Chinam en Kesef? So the Mefarshim say that, the Rishayim say that what this would mean is that when it says that there's an Odain here, there's a master that's receiving the money of the Kiddushin, instead of that master being the father, the master would be the husband. That he gets the Kesef Kiddushin that the wife gives him. And maybe the Kiddushin should take effect. Therefore, the Torah has to write kiyikach, that the man, the husband, takes his wife v'lo kisikach. She can't give the Kesef Kiddushin to take the husband to her. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara here. Tosfos disagrees. Tosfos says that it's obvious that he has to give her the money. Even if the Torah would not write the word kiyikach, I would understand automatically that the one that has to give the money is the husband. He's the one that's acquiring the wife to him. Okay, so rather, Tosfos says that the Gemara is saying regarding who says Hareyat Mukadeshesli, who's the one, the Amira. So the Havamina would be that just like the husband could say to the Isha Hareyat Mukadeshesli, so maybe also what happens if the wife tells the husband that you're marrying me, Hareyat Mukadeshli, right? That's again, or Harey Ani Mukadesheslech, something like that, yeah. Okay, so Al-Kapanim, so it's only been negated to the Amira over here. Okay, Al-Kapanim, so you have to over here the Tuli Mudim for Kesef, and they're clarifying to you how the Kiddusha of Kesef works. It goes to the father, and the Ish is the one that gives the Kiddushi Kesef to the Isha, and he's the one that tells her, Arei Mukadesh Asli. Okay, now the Gemara goes on to explain the source for Kiddushi Biyah. That when there's the marital relations between husband and wife, that itself creates the kinyan of Kiddushin. What's the source for this? So that this is clear in the pasuk. It says Uba'ala. After it says Ki Kachish Isha, so it says Uba'ala. So that means Malamet Sheniknis B'Biyah. That's the source that the kinyan is Biyah. Says the Gemara, what do I need the pasuk to spell this out? Valei Dinu. Can't I learn it with a Kavachomer? Uma Yevame. She'ein Niknis B'Kesef. If when it comes to a Yavama, where the kinyan of Kesef, as we mentioned before, does not create a marriage between a Yavam and a Yavama, but Niknas B'Biyah, Biyah creates that marriage. So Zusha Niknas B'Kesef, if it comes to a regular Isha, and the marriage is created through Kesef, any addition Niknas B'Biyah. So definitely I see the Torah is giving more options. Kesef works, so for sure Biyah should work. Says the Gemara, I can't compare an Isha to a Yavama, because I have another source to refute this. Amma Ivriya Techiach. I'll prove to you from Amma Ivriya that Kinyan Kesef works and not Biyah. Sheniknas B'Kesef, Vei Niknas B'Biyah. A master acquires the Amma Ivriya only with Kesef and not with Biyah. So instead of comparing and learning out of Isha from a Yavama, compare and learn out of Isha from an Amma Ivriya. But the Gemara says, no, you can't compare Isha to Amma Ivriya. Ma'ala Amma Ivriya she'en kinyan l'shum Ishus. by Amivriya, the reason why Bia doesn't work, only Kesef, is because he's acquiring her as a maid. It's not a marriage, so there's no room for Bia here. Here we're talking about a woman that's getting married to her husband, so that's why over here I see Bia works. So there's no comparison from Isha to Amivriya. So if so, we're left with the original Kavachaimer. Let's learn out the kinyan of Bia by an Isha from who? From a Yavama. So now the Braisa concludes, Talmud Loimar Uba'Allah. So we have the pasuk Uba'Allah that tells us that the kinyan of Bia works by Isha. So again, the Gemara immediately asks, what do I need the pasuk for? V'lama likra. Why is the Braisa concluding that I need a pasuk? Ha'asyala. Didn't we say that we could learn out Bia by Isha from Yavama? Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi here explains and says, because I can tell you, you can't compare a Isha to a Yavama. The whole comparison of a Isha to a Yavama is refuted. You want to compare the kinyan of a Isha to the kinyan of a Yavama, it's different. Even before the Yavama marries the Yavam, there's already a connection between them. And Rashi explains, Kukavay Medis means that when the husband passed away without children, so they're already connected, and the Bia, the marriage of the Yavama to the Yavam, is just coming to complete that marriage. It's not a kinyan from scratch. But when it comes to a regular marriage, there's no connection between this man and woman before their marriage. Over here, you need the Bia to create a very new marriage. So for that, you can't learn out from the Bia that there is by Yavama. That's why the Torah has to say Ba'ala as the source for the kinyan of Bia by Kidushin, of Isha and Isha.